Hello, everyone. Welcome to the hosted bar where we get to talk about our guests behind their backs, but usually in nice ways. As always, I'm Erin, and I have Miranda again with me today.
Hi.
So, Miranda, what are you drinking?
I have this time a loon juice, which is a Honeycrisp hard cider.
Ooh, from where?
From, valid question, I don't know.
I'm guessing Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota. Yep.
I have a Pinot Grigio. And because I am a complete wine snob, I buy it because labels look cute.
Nice.
And this one has a cute bicyclist
True.
on it. And we had teas of spring, and then it snowed 2 days this week. And so I felt the need to remember that bicycling season is coming.
True.
So our last one that we read, we had Jane Antonovich come and talk about feng shui, but also making your office work for you, which I think has been in a lot of people's minds, given the past 2 years. Their workspace has been in total flux. And so one of the things that I thought was kind of funny is the message that clutter kills never changes. And so I assume that one of these days I'll actually listen. My desk has shown that I haven't listened quite yet. So what was kind of one of your biggest kind of takeaways, given that you are just starting? Yes, you've had a office or workspace for law school and being a student, but I feel like as a student, you still got away from it more. And maybe when you're starting to work full time, you're thinking you'll be at your desk more often. So kind of what did you hear and what did you think was a good takeaway?
One thing that I found to be particularly poignant for me was her comment about how your space changes as you change, and that some people oscillate at different frequencies almost than other people, and then thus need to update their space faster than other people, because I have always been one of those people that constantly rearranges my space. I can pretty much only have a space in one orientation for 6 weeks, maybe 9 weeks, and then I start to freak out a little bit. Think of that what you may, but I liked her interpretation that it just means as I'm changing, I need my space to change with me. And so in college, I'd frequently decide it is 4 p.m. on a Sunday, I'm going to rearrange my whole room, and then all of a sudden you have your bed on your back and you're holding a lamp like this and you realize you haven't eaten in 9 hours, and that was kind of me all the time. So especially when everything settled into work from home, I completely took over my partner's work from home space, and I was like, I need this. I'm in 2L year of law school, it's mine now. And they graciously gave it away to me. And I've since then been making this space that I'm in now work for me. But that has involved 4 or 5 iterations of what the space has looked like. And I liked her interpretation that that's not inability to settle with anything or anything kind of in the negative realm, more in the positive realm of just making sure that your space masters the energy that you're bringing to it. So that nothing feels stagnant or uncomfortable. And
I like the idea of letting yours grow into your space. I thought that was an interesting way of how she was talking about how, if you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe it's because you've outgrown that space. And I hadn't really thought of it in that way. But don't feel that my mom was the same way as you. She would always be rearranging furniture, which my dad was not that person. And so he'd always be like, oh my God, what happened? What happened to the kitchen? And mom's like, zzz. I did. He's like, yup.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, my partner is like that as well. I always have to say, I'm going to rearrange it. And I know you're going to hate it for 2 days, but if you hate it on the 3rd day, I'll put it back. And it's always on the 3rd day, they're like, no. He's like, I like it.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
I like the compromise though. I also liked her thing about objects being used like her story about the books and how books, if they're just there, they can weigh it down. You have to use them. You have to like have your stuff essentially be something that you want to use and you want to have. Otherwise, it's just there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
So,
it becomes unapproachable even to you.
Right. Though I have, because we're lawyers and we still have paper, I do have a lot of client files that I'm wondering maybe I need to rifle through to bring my energy up.
Yeah, maybe. A nice, what did she say? She's like, you haven't gone through your shredding as you know you need to. Yeah.
That might be true.
Hmm.
So I also think it's interesting about what you can do, like work from home. You can pretty much, if you want to paint your walls, whatever color, or wallpaper, whatever color, you can. Or at least I can because it's my house. And so I loved her thing about just because you're renting doesn't mean you're stuck. But also what little things you can do, even if you don't want to do the ask forgiveness, not permission approach.
Yeah.
Because I remember being in offices and it feeling like it's not my office, and how that can be different. And so it'll be interesting to see how people, now that they've been working from home and going back to the office, how people going back to the same cubicle they were realize that it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
So if you took over your partner's spot, did that mean he had to go find a new spot, or?
Yes.
So has he changed his spot 1,000 times, or is it like he went there and it's there?
He went there and it's there. It's he's one of those people where like for the clutter thing is an issue, where it's like he needs the space to be completely clean and empty, and huge. Like he needs as much space as he can get to think. And if his space is cramped, then his like thoughts can't get beyond that space. So he just has a blank table and he works at the table and that's his space, and he doesn't like anything to be on the table. But I was thinking, because I did a lot of woodworking in college as part of my art major, part of me was thinking about like custom making some like L-shaped desks so that like this part could be my space and that part could be his space. But like those desks are like crazy expensive just by themselves, but it would be pretty easy to custom make them as long as you had access to like the woodworking materials. So that's my newest evil scheme in light of talking to Jane.
So whenever we do stuff, it's always amazing, like if you just have the right tools, how much more easy it is.
Yeah.
So one thing that we talked a bit with her about towards the end was like, what is feng shui and why does this cute blonde lady from Wisconsin get to say that? And that was actually something that you were really interested in. So can you talk about like why it matters?
Yeah. I mean, I found it was really interesting to hear her answer and like all the studying that she did with being an apprentice for 4 years and traveling actually to China to learn, because I'm kind of always wary of the Americanization, the Westernization, even the Midwesternization of some of these concepts, including, like yoga, feng shui, those types of things can just become somewhat of a bastardization of where they began. And when I was initially doing research into feng shui, I found a couple of articles where it was really interesting, where it's not just like a design or spatial thing that in the way that we would think about it, but it's more of like sometimes like affects entire city planning and like how the city should be planned in a feng shui manner, where it actually like cultivates the power of the space that the city's in, and does that mountain need to go in order for this space to actually work for us. And I really wish that kind of same mentality was brought to American building of cities, that would be fantastic if we were talking about like the space and the power and how it worked for the people in the community, instead of like, how can we put as many parking structures in the space as humanly possible? That would be great, in my opinion. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting to talk to her, and I was really happy with her answers and that she's clearly thoughtful about it. And I think that's all we can ask for, is people being thoughtful and knowledgeable and actually learning about it from a source that is like truly attached to where it came from.
So a couple of things that, well, she was talking about it. One, I think, speaking of Americanization of things, I think one of the things that America has forgotten is the power of apprenticeship. And how she's like, I just went along with her and asked questions and absorbed. And I think so much of that gets lost in like, oh, I went to class. Well, yeah. I read a book. I took a YouTube series on it. And how much that can, like, yes, all of those things can be helpful, but you aren't going to learn how to do a thing or be a thing until you do it. And have mentorship and be able to ask questions, and why is it this way and why is it that way? And so really appreciated that. Like, that's how she learned, is by watching, asking, doing.
Yeah.
And also I think your point of, so many things get dulled or painted over as to what is, such that it's not the thing that it started out being anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And that can happen so easily. And sometimes that's in cultural misappropriation. Sometimes that's just even like greenwashing, right? With projects, say, oh, this is eco-friendly, and nobody has any idea what that means. And so you get this term that sounds like it means something, but it doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
So asking those questions, like, what does this mean to you? What is this to you? I think is a really important thing. And then I think kind of your last point about, I wish cities were designed on this, and other things were designed on it. You're right. I wish they were. And I think there are people that are doing it, but they would never call it feng shui. They talk about livability and all that. And I wonder, are we losing some of that? Because sometimes, feng shui, it sounds too woo-woo or mysticism, but like, we are humans, and we, there are a lot of stuff that we aren't automatons. So having that woo-woo-ness isn't always a bad thing, because we are woo-woo-y.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes I almost feel like even the concept of like, oh, mysticism or anything like that can be like a corporate pushback, where it's like, it's way more money and time for me to make this a comfortable living space for humans, when I could just build it bland and gray, and you have your fluorescent lights and your cubicle boxes, and you sit there and you don't get to complain about it. And if you do, you are like asking for something extravagant. You're asking for something like, that's not connected to like science. And I think that that's been disproven, of actually people are more productive when they're in a space that they feel comfortable in, when they're in a space that they don't feel constantly cold, constantly overlit, constantly observed. Actually, people are more productive if you don't put them in those positions. And you lower your overhead too. Like, it's all of these benefits, and they actually are connected to science. I mean, a lot of people are doing these studies now where it's like, if you have more greenery, if you have things that are alive, and you have the ability to move around your space, you're more apt to do your work.
Speaking of more greenery, didn't you have a recent win in that your Monstera plant has done the growth for you?
Yeah. My Monstera plant full on was suckered into the fake spring. It was like 70 degrees. Here's 5 new leaves. And now it's cold, and my Monstera is looking a little bit sadder. But now I have 5 new leaves, so that's great.
So with her things, do you have wish list for your next workspace, or, you know, you said that some of your biggest takeaways is it's okay to change. And you talked about maybe having that L-shaped desk. Do you have other things that you're now like, I hadn't realized it was important before to have, you know, this, or I wish I could have this the next time?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about is like the ability to move and stand in a space. Because after sitting for a little while, like I can't do it anymore. So I was actually thinking about like a standing desk, because I know some people get them and they were kind of a fad for a little while. I think just the ability to have it go up and then go back down, because I don't want like a constantly standing situation. I want to be able to sit.
You don't want to be at a bar.
Yeah, like I don't want to have to get one of those fluffy mats for my feet. Like that's a little intense for me. But I do want sometimes the ability to just like put it up and then stand. I think that would be great. And then I think like kind of a substitute for the renter thing, the renter problem of like I can't very well put wallpaper on my historically preserved building, but I could get, you know, you can substitute in those types of ways. We're getting like just really big prints.
Yeah, I thought that was a really clever thing of hers.
Yeah, like if you like supersize the thing behind you and had to take up like half your wall, like that would be basically the same feeling as wallpaper, and it would involve a lot less glue and like swearing. So that's one way to do it, I think.
There's with COVID and all that, a lot of us started thinking about what's behind us more, because you could see in Zoom. And I was meeting with a woman who her business does essentially like pull down screens.
Really?
Or different things behind you, so you can have kind of a Zoom wall behind you without it having to be, you know, paint or permanent, and or the weird fake ones where you get the finger webbing.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's really smart. I mean, one of my really good friends who's an alumni who graduated last year, she's brilliant, but does not like interior design or anything like that. And so she sent me frantic text messages when she got her job. And she was like, I start on Monday. Can you please come over and like help me make my Zoom background? And I'm unpacking and I don't know what looks good. And I'm like, okay, yes, of course. Like, so I went over to her apartment and we set up, you know, like a bookshelf behind her and had some good looking books, but then also like mementos and little like keepsakes and pictures and stuff, so it wouldn't look like a library. And we hung up her diploma and hung up her like you know, Wisconsin has the canes and stuff that we get from Cane Floss, so we hung up all that kind of stuff behind her, and she was really happy because then she felt like at her new job she actually had something that she could be proud of.
That was her space.
Yeah, that it was hers, and that she was like not having to also worry about whatever was going on there on her very first day at work, because that shouldn't be a concern.
Nice. So with the other stuff, in talking to her about how she became, you know, from a teacher in school to a teacher in kind of space, because I think a lot of it was like, you know, understanding who you are and what you need. And I think she has a lot of like being a teacher first, I bet translated a lot into that, and then kind of apprenticing and being mentored. Did you see, again, as a young professional, did you see any things that you were like, oh, I wanted to have that, or I see that, or I you know, kind of that, how she got into that thing? Did you see anything there? Because from my side, I saw a lot. Really?
I'm curious what you saw, I guess, first.
Well, I think I talked a little bit about how the apprenticeship is more than a, you know, show from the 10 years ago, and how I think that's a lot lacking in the fact that that is a very valid and useful way, even if you have gone through law school, that you still need that. I think one of the things that we didn't talk a lot with Jane on, but I think came through, was having that mentorship. I mean, she was an adult, she had kids, she still needed a mentor. Right? Mentorship isn't just for high school students.
No, I mean, kind of circuitously, however I'm trying to say that word. One thing that I was thinking about actually is we're going over expert testimony rules and evidence right now. And though evidence is not my bag, not my strong suit, I thought it was interesting that these expert rules make it very clear that yes, you can become an expert in something through study and knowledge, but you can also be an expert in something just through experience, or time invested in something like a technical skill, like becoming a mechanic, becoming all of these other things that are done exactly through apprenticeship. And there's a bunch of cases, trying to disqualify experts as like, oh, you're not learned enough, haven't gone to enough school. And the courts came back and like, no, you can actually be a qualified expert in the eyes of the court through apprenticeship or through expertise by time. So yeah, and it's very valid, I think, in kind of in the world of expertise now. Important to remember that it comes in lots of different forms, and that's why we care about clinics at law schools and stuff like that, where it's not just sit in class, but actually get to go and have a clinical experience, and you can firsthand do that yourself, and get to learn stuff that you otherwise never would. Like, how long does it take a client to respond to an email is a really important question that you don't really get to ask your class professors. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting. I also thought that her going from being a teacher to there was also interesting, because I would love to like see pictures of her like classrooms, right? Because that some classrooms are just horrible learning environments, because of how pictures where it's like there's no ceiling tiles, and there's like these walls have been repainted poorly 5 times by a teacher trying, but like it takes a lot of effort to make it not look like a prison cell. And now that people are realizing like it's actually very important that this doesn't look like a prison cell, and that this is inviting and not a place students desperately want to leave as soon as they get in there, is very important. And I think that even extends to higher education. Like, my law school is beautiful, but also sometimes I'm looking around and I'm like, has this piece of art been here for 50 years? Because I'm pretty sure it has been, and it needs to go. Like, but just no one looks at it with a critical eye of like, actually, is this affecting students? Because at least for me, in my hyper aestheticism, visual learner ways, it is.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I didn't know I needed to worry about my toaster placement until I talked to her.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm worried about where, like, maybe I need to move my bread box. I had no idea this is a new level of anxiety that I didn't even know I needed to have.
Well, if you want to know an even deeper level of anxiety, I heard from some like a sound expert that how all of our electronics actually are like making noise that you might not be able to hear, right? So sometimes, and humans are very affected by different chords and musics, and some music makes you happy, some music makes you sad. If your toaster and your fridge are both humming at a frequency that's ultimately leading to a sad chord, and you're just constantly hearing like a subconscious sad chord, it can actually really affect your mental health.
See, these are things I don't need to know.
Yeah, it's really bad.
I don't need to know that my toaster and refrigerator are colluding to make me sad. Maybe I think maybe the other way. I think that they are trying to find the right chord to make me happy.
Yeah, they
just need some encouragement.
Chord. Yeah. Maybe they're major chord toaster and fridge, and not minor chord
right
fridge. Yeah.
Let's just assume that my toaster and refrigerator are making me happy.
Yeah, that's better.
There are things I don't like. Come on. So I was really happy that Jane talked to us about feng shui and about making your space your own, but I was really happy that she kind of talked beyond that. The one thing we didn't ask, because 30 minutes goes awfully fast with the guest, is she mentoring anyone? Right? Yeah. Is like, because one question I always have for small businesses and solopreneurs is, what are you going to do when you're done? Right? How are you going to, are you just closing up shop and that's it? Or are you going to sell it? Is someone taking over? What happens to those clients? And we didn't get a chance to talk to her about it. And I honestly don't want to put someone on the spot, be like, so tell me about your demise. But I always am worried about, so especially when it's such a personal one and where it takes things, what happens? Because I always get worried that they're just going to close up, and they've built up all of that goodwill, all of those client bases, and then they don't get a return on that investment when they retire?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a really good question. I think it's one that we're taught to think about as lawyers more than other people, partially because I feel like lawyers are always operating in like the worst, like what if the worst happens type of a thing, and the worst is your demise. So we're taught to think about that kind of stuff. Like I remember one of the first clients that I had with Jeff at the clinic, it was my merry job to ask them like, so what do you want to happen, when I was writing their agreement, like what do you want to happen to this LLC if you die? And like as a little 1L, and the client was so awestruck of like, why are you asking me that? Like I have no idea. Why do you want to know? Like, do you know something I don't know?
Right. Well, your doctor called and
yeah, in the middle of COVID too. So I was like, hello. I was like, do you want your kids to have this? They might not want it. Like, have you thought about that? And
right.
we have to ask those questions for the benefit of them ultimately, but it can be difficult to ask them in the moment.
For sure. So any last thoughts about feng shui, about offices, about making your space your own, about learning how to be your new profession?
I mean, I was thinking about it, kind of my question of like, if our firm, for example, was to have an office space that we all shared, you, me, Colin, Sherry, everybody, how we would find a feng shui that works for all of us, because we're all such different people, that I think it would be like a little choose your own adventure of everybody's offices being just like wildly different, if we were allowed to make them that way. So I guess it's another whole question of just like, sure, you can control your own individual space, but what do you do if you're in like a shared smaller firm or smaller business?
Or even larger, because now you have even more personalities.
Yeah. Now we need a lot more rooms for our little Encanto house, but it would be very interesting, I think, to have like bring in her, just like, how do you make all of this work together? Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, I think a lot of it was interesting because it made me, I always love guests that, yeah, you thought about it, but they have a new twist of it or a new way of thinking about, hordes of books isn't just clutter and a fire hazard, but it's actually, a stagnant force or things like that. And so it gives me a good reason to go through and look at all of my books again. So I always appreciate that type of stuff. And I really appreciate Jane being able to talk about feng shui and how you can become known that by reaching out and doing more and changing your career, going from a teacher to this and going to China and kind of immersing yourself in that. So I was really glad that she was willing to talk about that, and because I know a lot of people can be defensive about it, and she just wasn't. So it's always fabulous to talk to Jane, and I think she did a fabulous job of proving that's true.
Yeah. No, I found it was very good, very fun first guest for me to have. So I was excited about it.
Awesome. All right. Well, then I don't know who our next guest is because I got waylaid, but we will figure it out and we will let people know. All right. Thanks so much. Bye.